Valyrian steel swords are ultra-light and ultra-sharp weapons forged using ancient blood magic techniques from Valyria. The forging technique was lost in the Doom of Valyria, so these swords are extremely rare. Most Valyrian steel blades in Westeros are treasured heirlooms of noble houses, each with its own name, characters, and history. Here's every one of them, with the most significant one at the end. Ice was the ancestral Valyrian steel greatsword of House Stark, being with the family for thousands of years, likely dating back to the Age of Heroes. It was the biggest Valyrian steel sword in Westeros. The sword was nearly as wide as a man's hand and taller than an average man. After Eddard Stark's execution during the War of the Five Kings, the sword was seized by House Lannister, and Tywin Lannister had it melted down to create two smaller swords, Oathkeeper and Widow's Wail, which we will talk about later. It was quite an insult to take a sacred ancestral sword of another great house and make your own out of it. When Ned Stark himself beat Arthur Dayne, the Sword of the Morning, in a dual fight, he brought Arthur's sword back to House Dayne out of respect. Longclaw was the ancestral sword of House Mormont, a small noble house from the remote Bear Island in the north. The Mormonts were not wealthy or powerful, but they had a reputation for fierce loyalty and martial skills. The sword's name, Longclaw, likely references the bears that are central to the Mormont sigil and identity. The sword was initially given to Jorah Mormont, who brought shame to his house when he fled Westeros after being caught selling poachers into slavery. His father took the sword with him when he joined the Night's Watch and gifted Longclaw to Jon Snow as a recognition of his bravery. The bear's head pommel was replaced with a dire wolf, a symbol of House Stark. Jon later tried to give the sword back to Jorah Mormont, but Jorah also thought Jon was more worthy. Oathkeeper was forged from the great sword ice of House Stark. Tywin Lannister had the blade melted down by a master armorer, who reforged the Valyrian steel into two swords, Oathkeeper and Widow's Wail. Tywin gifted Oathkeeper to his son, Jaime Lannister, as a reward for his service and also as a bribe, hoping to convince him to be the heir of House Lannister. However, struggling with his own sense of honor and purpose after losing his sword hand, Jaime passed the sword to Brienne of Tarth. Brienne named it Oathkeeper in recognition of her vow to protect the Stark daughters, thus imbuing the sword with a new sense of purpose. The blade had quite a journey from a Stark heirloom to a Lannister weapon, and finally to Brienne, who swore to protect the Stark girls. Widow's Wail was the second sword forged from ice. Tywin presented Widow's Wail to his grandson, King Joffrey Baratheon, as a wedding gift. The sword was named by Joffrey himself, likely reflecting his cruel and sadistic nature. Joffrey reveled in the sword's symbolic connection to House Stark's downfall, though he had little appreciation for its true value as a piece of Valyrian steel. What a stupid cunt. After Joffrey's death, the sword passed to his younger brother, Tommen, who never used it in battle. Heartsbane was the ancestral Valyrian steel greatsword of House Tarly, one of the most respected martial houses in the Reach. Randall Tarly, the Lord of House Tarly, prized the sword as a key part of his family's legacy and intended to pass it on to his heir Dickon. However, Samwell Tarly, Randall's less favorite son, took Heartsbane with him to the Wall, recognizing the sword's potential importance in the fight against the White Walkers. Dark Sister was one of the two ancestral swords of House Targaryen, originally forged in ancient Valyria. The sword was wielded by Visenya Targaryen, one of Aegon the Conqueror's sister wives. Visenya used Dark Sister in many battles during the Targaryen conquest of Westeros. After Visenya's death, Dark Sister was passed down through the Targaryen line, eventually coming into the possession of Brynden Rivers, known as Bloodraven, a Targaryen bastard who became the Hand of the King and later the Three-Eyed Raven. In the House of the Dragon series, Dark Sister was wielded by the fierce Daemon Targaryen. The other ancestral sword of House Targaryen was Blackfyre, wielded by Aegon the Conqueror himself during his campaign to unite the Seven Kingdoms. Blackfyre had a distinctive appearance, with the blade darker than most Valyrian steels. The sword was passed down through the Targaryen kings, but it gained particular notoriety when it was given to Daemon Blackfyre, a legitimized Targaryen bastard. Daemon took the sword's name for his own, establishing House Blackfyre and challenging the Targaryen rule in a series of civil wars known as the Blackfyre Rebellions. Brightroar was the ancestral Valyrian steel sword of House Lannister, the ruling house of the Westerlands and one of the richest and most influential families in Westeros. Brightroar was lost when King Tommen II Lannister led an expedition to the old city of Valyria in search of lost wealth and glory. The entire expedition vanished, and with it, Brightroar. Dawn was the ancestral greatsword of House Dayne, whose wielders were called Sword of the Morning. House Dayne was from Dorne and was known for producing some of the finest knights in Westeros. Technically, Dawn was not made of Valyrian steel, but was instead forged from the metal of a fallen star, and as sharp and strong as any Valyrian steel blade. The greatsword was big and long, with a unique pale, almost glowing appearance. The last and probably most famous Sword of the Morning was Sir Arthur Dayne. who was tasked with a mission to protect Rhaegar's lover, Lyanna Stark, from Robert's rebellion. Ned Stark famously won the dual fight at the Tower of Joy and returned Dawn back to Starfall, the seat of Heartsbane. Vigilance was the Valyrian steel sword of House Hightower. The last known wielder of Vigilance was Ormond Hightower, Lord of House Hightower and nephew of Otto Hightower. Ormond actually used Vigilance to knight Daeron Targaryen, dubbing him Ser Daeron the Daring, for his contribution on the battlefield with his dragon Tessarion. The Vigilance was lost after Ormond's death. Before we talk about the most important Valyrian blade of them all, here are some honorable mentions of some lesser-known ones. Lady Forlorn, the ancestral Valyrian steel sword of House Corbray in the Vale. The sword was most famously wielded by Sir Lyn Corbray during Robert's Rebellion, where it was used to slay Prince Lewin Martell of the Kingsguard. Red Rain, the Valyrian steel sword of House Drum from Old Wick, one of the Iron Islands. Red Rain was not originally forged for House Drum, but was taken as a prize during a raid in the Reach. Lamentation, the Valyrian steel sword of House Royce in the Vale. It was lost in the storming of the Dragon Pit. Nightfall, the sword of House Harlaw from the Iron Islands. Orphan-Make, the sword of House Roxton from the Reach. Now, let's talk about the one blade that literally changed the course of history multiple times. The Dagger of Aegon's Prophecy, also known as the Catspaw Dagger. Aegon inscribed on its hilt a secret prophecy foretelling the coming of the White Walkers. Remember that the Targaryens already stationed in Dragonstone for hundreds of years after the Doom without ever interfering with the Westeros. It was the White Walkers' prophecy that motivated Aegon to begin the conquest and unite the realm against this existential threat. This prophecy was passed down through Targaryen generations, tied to the notion that a prince that was promised would be born to save the world. If not for this blade and what was written on it, most of the events in House of the Dragon and Game of Thrones would not have happened. At the end of Season 2 of House of the Dragon, the dagger is in possession of Aegon II of Team Green. About 200 years later, this dagger fell to the hand of Littlefinger and then to Arya Stark. And it was this very dagger that killed the Night King, ending the winter threat lingering for thousands of years and fulfilling the prophecy in the process.